Hold on. Yay! Finally, recording episode 4.
Yeah.
Episode 2, but episode 1 was broken into 3 parts.
Sure.
But
The second series.
the second in series. The second series? Whatever.
Semantics.
Either way, finally shooting for the second time.
Yep.
Thank you for keep pushing me to do it, despite me getting bogged down by all the circumstances. But first of all, I just want to say thanks everyone for watching the videos, watching the first 3 videos. It's been really nice to also, not only have you watch it, but also to show us love and support, both publicly and privately. It's been very nice.
It's been lovely.
And it's been really nice to share. And for us to get a little giddy about what else to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, really for kind of this episode, we wanted to talk about kind of all things transition. And not just about the obvious gender transition, but as we alluded to it in the last episode, there's been obviously also a transition in our relationship. So there's kind of lots to talk about. I think, we also said we wanted to maybe go back and talk about the early days of our relationship. And I'm sure we will do that. Some of those things will come up also naturally, but I think why not go to a place where our hearts want to go? And yeah, I don't know. Ali, before we kind of started shooting, you were talking about feeling a little nervous.
Yeah, I mean, there's just there's a lot of personal stuff regarding transition for me, naturally. I don't know. I'm sure that as we get into things, my nerves will lessen.
But it is the personal nature of it, and therefore requiring some vulnerability. Do you feel some hesitation sharing more publicly about your transition journey? What do you think?
No. I mean, the exposure is one thing. It's a pretty nasty climate out there for trans people. But I'm happy to share my story, our story. I guess part of it is just the first video just went so well. I want to, keep the quality up.
And the momentum.
Momentum, yeah.
That's partly why you were like, you gotta make another video. You gotta make another video.
Yeah, you gotta stay on that content.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's kind of, in the last 3 videos, we obviously talked about kind of when you came to realize you were trans that day. And of course, since then, you've been doing a whole lot of transitioning.
Whole bunch.
A whole bunch,
Much transitioning.
Close to 4 years. Not quite, but close to 4 years of transitioning. I guess I'm curious, was there a moment in those kind of, maybe more so in the early days, when you kind of had this wow, I'm really changing? Would you say that was after you started the hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, no, I would say it's in relation to hormone therapy. Obviously, that, causes the most physical changes to happen. I mean, I say that, and the social transition was massive when because I was so So maybe I shouldn't say that because it's hard to go back to that mindset. It's very hard to like go back to that place of like petrified fear of like when I first started wearing makeup and going out in public. I was terrified.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. 'Cause I don't know why. I think it's a nervous
That's fine.
laughter,
That's
but-
fine.
Because I was also petrified.
Yeah, and you like weren't showing that so much because you were, it was like you were kind of in a more of a protective role in our relationship, and we talked about that at that time as things developed. But yeah, when I started wearing more girly clothes and doing makeup without any hormones, without long hair, yeah, that was the biggest.
Stepping out for the first time.
Yeah, and it's been like since like I started taking hormones. It's been more of a natural progression. But when I look back, even like a year ago, it's like, oh wow, I've changed so much. But I guess when I really look back upon like the first, initial days of socially transitioning, that was the biggest. I mean, that was me going with different pronouns, totally different style, letting this other part of myself out, being scared to even walk in our building, with people who had seen me from before. So, as I know, other trans people can relate to that.
Yeah, there were basically almost just under 2 years of you doing a lot of social transitioning before you started the hormone therapy.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like almost halfway into that.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I should give some context. Like 4 years is kind of like 4 years of being on hormones. Like the most changes will happen before things kind of plateau. So I'm like almost halfway through that process. And really, when I started, it was like smaller doses. Now I'm on like pretty much the highest dose of estrogen you could be on, and progesterone and all that too. So. Yeah, it's always difficult to imagine what it's going to be like in a year's time, but I will feminize more within that time. It's just going to be the way it is.
Is there a part of you that's a little bit anxious that you are halfway? Like
No.
halfway, as in, like you said, halfway of the kind of most significant and noticeable changes?
It's one of those things where it's like as soon as you start taking hormones, or like for a lot of people who like taking hormones is very aligned, it's almost like you feel the changes right away. It's not possible. It's not actually happening. But there's just like
Psychosomatic.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's just like exponential, right? And so in a year's time, I'll look back at now and be like, oh yeah, like I wasn't as feminized as I am. I will have been then, will be at that time. But right now, it's like, wow, like, I'm just looking back and it's like, I've changed so much. I'm feeling really good in my skin. I'm feeling really good about where I am in life. I'm feeling really good about my transition. And it's hard to imagine being more feminized. Because it's not like I don't want it, but it's hard to picture it. I don't know what it's going to look like, I look forward to it, though.
Yeah. I mean, arguably, even where you are now, you couldn't have never imagined.
No.
So
That's the
you
thing.
are already something that you couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Makes a lot
even
of
compared to a year ago. Right? And I guess like in the next while, my dosage won't change. Like it can't be increased. And so maybe the changes will be affected by that in the rate of change. I mean, I guess like things would change quicker, now that I'm on the higher dose than when I first started. Yeah. All I have to say, it's a gradual process, and it's always, it's like, you just live life. You're not thinking about your transition all the time as a trans person. And then you look back at yourself in a photo from a year before, or 2 years before, and it's like, wow, I have actually really changed. And I felt so femme and so in my skin and so excited at like that point. But now I'm even more, like I'm embracing that, but it's also like I'm just comfortable. It's not so new. It's just part of life.
I mean, I think you have said this a number of times where, you started to feel more and more, or really you feel more in your skin than ever. But I'm curious, when would you say that really started? Was it kind of as soon as you started the social transitioning? Is there a part where you can kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, there was this point where I just maybe like saw a reflection of myself and really felt in your skin?
I guess it was pretty early on. Hair really helped. And when I look back even a year ago, it's like, oh, that's not as long as I like have now. Like, I wouldn't want that hair. But I mean, I felt that even prior to my like starting hormones during the social transition, because I was like letting myself be a certain way at work, dealing with people, and having certain people really affirm that helped a lot.
Like when the curls started coming in, you really felt more in your skin.
Yeah. I would say I don't know. I mean, there's so many factors because none of it's happening in a vacuum, right? There's like how I felt about these. There's been a lot of changes with my work life, and there was a lot of anxiety and feelings about it, instability and, where am I going to go from here? And I mean, I've changed that stuff dramatically. So, but I do remember just feeling things settle more last summer. Yeah, but that again, it wasn't just having to do with my like comfort with my transition,
Yeah, there were a lot of other factors.
It's really hard to pinpoint that, like, make it so isolated with that one factor. Yeah.
But
that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and if there's a moment that comes to mind, feel free to share. And it makes sense that it's not so much like, and then at this time, but I was curious, if you had sort of those moments just kind of with yourself, like in private, kind of feeling like you can acknowledge for all the changes, and maybe those moments actually happen quite frequently. That's also maybe why you can't really pinpoint to a time like 2 years ago or like a year into hormones. Like, I feel like we've been also marking some of these days, and you're like 2 years on hormones is coming up in a month,
Right.
Really, only I'm marking these
Yeah.
days.
Well, I'm thankful for you. Time is flying.
It is flying, but I'm curious, given that it's kind of, we've been saying like there's a relationship between your transition and our relationship transitioning as well. You talked about this moment where really early on we would go out in public spaces and you felt like I was playing this like protector role. I'm curious what that was like for you.
There's a lot of answer to that question. Well, because like for one, it was like, in a very kind of almost binary sense, which is weird to say,
Yeah.
but like it felt affirming, right? But we also discussed it as it was happening throughout those early months. And I knew that was something that you were kind of putting on because you were afraid of like me being treated with hostility in the world. And I didn't want that pressure to be on you. So I felt kind of bad about it. And that has since eased.
Like, you mean when you say, like, in a binary way, it felt affirming, it felt like I was trying to be the man. Is that kind of?
Yeah, and obviously, like, that's not the case.
I was trying to.
Yeah. And at the time, it worked. It was a very tender time.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I needed some protection, even if it was just psychological and emotional.
Yeah.
Because nothing really happened in those years as far as like outward harm. I was cocooning a lot though, socially. I was not going out into the world that much unless it was for work. Yeah. So it was affirming, but there was some guilt attached to it. And since then, it's felt like that hypervigilance maybe within you has really eased. And you still have this way of like, when we walk in the world sometimes, the way you put your arm on my back or something, my lower back, or like my waist. And I really like it. And I like to know that that's actually not something that's extra for you, that's not put on. That's now something that feels aligned and comfortable for you. So that's lovely, And I can do that with you too.
Yeah. I think, I think in the early days, I think you didn't also feel comfortable showing me affection in ways that you were used to showing me affection.
Right.
As a quote unquote man, previously. Because I think, for lack of a better word, the word that comes to mind is like kind of fragility. There was like a little bit of fragility around this like kind of newly expressing gender. Yeah. So therefore, it's like you were so afraid to be read as a man in any kind of way that you, I think, also like sort of like retracted those kind of ways of being in public. I think.
Yeah, and I mean, you have clearly like you have the analysis and understanding for that. You did, but I'm sorry.
I mean, I always analyze. I always have some kind of analysis about the situation.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, it must have been hard for me to withdraw because that was part of the binary thing that I was referring to. It's like, I need to be hard femme now because like I need to like protect it so much because it's so fragile and scarce. Yeah. And that's maybe something we can talk about at another point is the femininity, the scarcity of femininity and beauty that us femmes all have to navigate in the world.
In a way, I mean, I think that's actually, there's a lot to that. And you felt like that was something that existed between us too, where it was like, there was only so much femininity that between the two of us could take up. Is that sort of what you mean also in relation to us specifically?